Pretend to love me for one. When a lonely CEO offers a broke single dad $1 million to fake love, no one expects it to end with real wedding rings, shocking betrayals, and a child's innocent truth that could either create a family or tear one apart forever. But when love starts as pretend, can it ever survive for real? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The evening sun cast long shadows across the diner's worn linoleum floor as James Carter wiped down his last table. His back ached from hours of carrying heavy trays, and his feet felt like lead in his sturdy work shoes. The smell of coffee and fried food had long since faded into the background of his consciousness. Just another part of the daily grind. "Good work today, James," called Martha, the head waitress, as she counted her tips at the counter. "You really saved us during that dinner rush." James managed a tired smile. "Thanks, Martha. See you tomorrow." He glanced at his watch, and his heart jumped. It was already 7:45. Mrs. Rodriguez from apartment 4B had been watching Lily since school let out, and he hated keeping them waiting. In the employee bathroom, James quickly changed out of his grease-spotted uniform into a clean t-shirt and jeans. The mirror showed him a face that looked older than his 32 years. Dark circles under his eyes, worry lines etched around his mouth. Sarah used to tease him about his premature gray hairs, saying they made him look distinguished. The familiar ache in his chest returned at the thought of his late wife. Outside, the summer evening was sticky and warm. James jogged the 3 blocks to his apartment building, taking the stairs 2 at a time to the 4th floor. Mrs. Rodriguez opened her door before he could knock, the smell of enchiladas wafting into the hallway. "There you are, mijo," she said warmly. "Lily's just finishing her homework." "Daddy!" Lily's face lit up as she appeared behind Mrs. Rodriguez, her dark curls bouncing. She launched herself into his arms, and James caught her, pushing aside his exhaustion to return her enthusiasm. "Thanks again, Mrs. R," James said, reaching for his wallet, but the older woman waved him off. No, you can pay me Friday. I know it's been tight lately." Heat crept up James's neck. Was his financial struggle that obvious? "I really appreciate it," he managed. Back in their small apartment, James heated up leftover spaghetti while Lily chattered about her day at school. The kitchen was barely big enough for their tiny table, but they made it work. Everything in their life was about making it work. Somehow. And then Jenny brought her new puppy for show and tell, Lily was saying. "Daddy, could we ever—" "Not right now, sweetie." James cut in gently, already knowing where this was heading. Another thing he couldn't give her. The list seemed endless sometimes. No pets, no summer camp, no new clothes unless absolutely necessary. The guilt sat heavy in his stomach alongside his reheated pasta. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Unknown number. James usually ignored these. Bill collectors were persistent, but something made him answer this time. "Mr. Carter?" A crisp, professional voice. "This is Margaret Wilson from Blackwood Associates Law Firm. I'm calling to arrange a meeting regarding an opportunity that could be of significant interest to you." James frowned. "I think there must be some mistake." "No mistake, Mr. Carter. Our client has specifically requested you. The meeting would be tomorrow at 2 p.m. We understand you work 2 jobs. We're prepared to compensate you for your time." His mind raced. Tomorrow was his afternoon off from the diner, before his evening shift at the warehouse. What kind of opportunity? "I'm afraid I can't discuss details over the phone, but I assure you, Mr. Carter, it would be worth your while to attend." After getting the address, a prestigious downtown office building he'd only seen from afar, James hung up, bewildered. Lily was watching him with curious eyes. "Who was that, Daddy?" "Just grown-up stuff, sweetheart. Time for your bath, okay?" Later, after Lily was clean and in her favorite worn pajamas, James sat on the edge of her bed. Really just a mattress on the floor of their single bedroom. The walls were bare, except for Lily's drawings, and a photo of Sarah, smiling at the beach during their last family vacation before she got sick. "Tell me about Mommy again," Lily asked sleepily, clutching her threadbare stuffed rabbit. James smoothed her curls back from her forehead. "She was the bravest, kindest person I ever knew. Just like you, she could make anyone laugh, even on their worst day. And she gave the best hugs in the world. Better than yours? Way better than mine." James chuckled softly, though his heart ached. "And she loved you more than anything. She still does, watching over us from heaven." Lily was quiet for a moment, her small face serious in the dim light from her nightlight. "Daddy?" "Yes, baby. Do you think we'll ever have a real home?" Her voice was small, vulnerable in a way that made his chest tight. "Like Jenny's house, with a backyard and everything?" James swallowed hard against the lump in his throat. He thought about the past due bills on the kitchen counter, the rent increase notice, the holes he kept patching in their lives. But looking into his daughter's hopeful eyes, he couldn't bear to crush her dreams. "I promise you, Lilybug," he whispered, using Sarah's old nickname for her. "I'm going to find a way, somehow." He leaned down to kiss her forehead. "I love you to the moon and back, and to the stars," Lily murmured, her eyes already closing. It was their nightly ritual, started by Sarah years ago. James sat there until Lily's breathing evened out into sleep, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. In the quiet darkness, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of his exhaustion, his worry, his grief. Sarah should be here, helping him figure this out. They should be giving their daughter the life they'd planned together. The mysterious phone call tugged at his thoughts. He didn't believe in easy solutions or miracle opportunities. Life had taught him better than that. But for Lily's sake, he had to at least find out what it was about. He owed her that much. Looking at his sleeping daughter's peaceful face, James made a silent promise, not just to Lily, but to Sarah's memory too. Whatever it took, he would find a way to give their little girl the stability and security she deserved, even if it meant taking a chance on whatever tomorrow's meeting might bring. James Carter stood at the base of the Grant Industries building, his reflection distorted in the gleaming glass facade that stretched toward the clouds. His worn work boots scuffed against the pristine sidewalk, and he tugged self-consciously at the collar of his only dress shirt, a pale blue button-down he usually saved for parent-teacher conferences. The revolving door felt heavy as he pushed through it, the cool air conditioning hitting his face like a wall. The lobby was all polished marble and sleek metal, with a massive crystal chandelier that probably cost more than his yearly salary. Well-dressed people strode purposefully across the floor, their shoes clicking importantly against the stone. James approached the security desk, acutely aware of how his slightly wrinkled shirt and department store slacks marked him as an outsider. "I have an appointment," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "James Carter to see Mr. Grant." The security guard checked a tablet, then nodded. 42nd floor, they're expecting you." The elevator ride felt endless. James watched the numbers climb higher and higher, his stomach tightening with each floor. What kind of opportunity could possibly await him up here? The lawyer's phone call had been cryptic, offering no details beyond a time and place. When the doors finally opened, a sleek reception area greeted him. A professionally dressed woman looked up from behind a curved desk. "Mr. Carter, this way, please." She led him down a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than his apartment. The conference room she showed him into had floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a dizzying view of the city below. "Mr. Grant will be with you shortly," she said, closing the door behind her. James walked to the windows, looking down at the toy-sized cars and people far below. His reflection showed a man trying his best to look confident, but the slight tremor in his hands betrayed his nerves. The door opened exactly 5 minutes later. Daniel Grant entered with the authority of someone who owned not just the building, but half the skyline visible through those windows. He was tall and distinguished, his silver hair perfectly styled, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than James's car. "Mr. Carter," Grant said, extending his hand. His handshake was firm and brief. "Please, sit." James lowered himself into one of the leather chairs as Grant took his place at the head of the table. The CEO opened a leather portfolio and removed a single sheet of paper. "I'll be direct," Grant said, his voice clipped and businesslike. "I have a proposition for you. $1 million for 1 year of your time." James blinked. "I'm sorry? $1 million, Grant repeated, as if stating the weather forecast. "In exchange, you would pretend to be my partner for the next 12 months. The words hung in the air between them. James waited for the punchline, but Grant's expression remained serious. "Is this some kind of joke?" James finally managed. "I assure you it's not." Grant's fingers drummed once on the table. "My board of directors is pushing for a more stable public image. We're pursuing a major philanthropic merger, and they feel a CEO with a family life would be more appropriate than a single man." James's mind reeled. "So you want to hire someone to pretend to be your partner?" "Precisely." Grant slid the paper across the table. "The terms are quite generous. Monthly allowance, housing allowance, complete medical coverage. The full amount would be placed in escrow and released to you after the year is complete." James stared at the numbers on the page, his throat dry. It was more money than he'd ever seen in his life, the kind of money that could give Lily everything she deserved. A good home, the best schools, a real future. But something cold settled in his stomach as he looked up at Grant's calculating expression. This man wasn't looking for a partner. He was shopping for a prop. "And my daughter?" James asked, his voice tight. "What role would she play in this arrangement?" She would be an asset, Grant replied smoothly. A ready-made family would be even more convincing to the board. James's chair scraped against the floor as he stood up suddenly. An asset? The word tasted bitter in his mouth. My daughter isn't some prop for your corporate image. Grant's expression didn't change. I'm offering you a very generous solution to what I understand are significant financial difficulties. That cold feeling in James's stomach turned to anger. You've been checking up on me? Due diligence, Grant said dismissively. The offer stands. $1 million for 1 year of your time. A simple business arrangement. James grabbed his worn jacket from the back of the chair. My daughter and I aren't for sale, Mr. Grant. Not for your reputation or your board or any amount of money. He turned and strode toward the door, his hands shaking with anger now instead of nerves. At the threshold, he paused and looked back at Grant, who seemed mildly surprised by his reaction. I won't sell myself or my daughter for your reputation. James's voice was quiet but firm. He pulled the door open and walked out, leaving the $1 million offer behind on the gleaming conference table. The evening dinner rush at Pete's Diner felt especially chaotic. James moved between tables with practiced efficiency, but his mind kept drifting back to that strange meeting in the glass tower. The weight of Daniel Grant's offer pressed heavily on his thoughts. Order up, called Pete from the kitchen window. James grabbed 2 plates of meatloaf, carefully balancing them as he headed toward table 6. His manager, Rick, appeared suddenly beside him. Table 4 still waiting on their check, Carter. Get your head in the game. The sharp tones startled James. The plates slipped from his hands, crashing to the floor in a mess of gravy and mashed potatoes. The diner fell silent except for the clattering of broken ceramic. That's coming out of your pay, Rick snapped. Clean it up, now. James's cheeks burned as he grabbed the broom and dustpan. While sweeping up the shards, numbers flashed through his mind like a brutal slideshow. $800 for rent, due in 5 days. $245 for Lily's latest asthma prescription. $79 for the school shoes she desperately needed. Her current pair held together with duct tape. I'm sorry, he muttered, though Rick had already stormed off. The rest of his shift passed in a blur of coffee, refills, and forced smiles. By closing time, his feet ached and his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. He couldn't stop thinking about Daniel Grant's words. $1 million. 1 year. At home, Mrs. Martinez from next door was reading to Lily. The elderly woman refused payment for babysitting, saying Lily's company was payment enough. James thanked her with a grateful hug. Daddy! Lily bounced off the worn couch. Look what I drew today. She thrust a crayon drawing into his hands. On the paper was a house, not their cramped apartment, but a proper house with a chimney and windows. A green yard spread around it, complete with a swing set and what looked like a dog. 3 stick figures stood in front, a tall one with brown hair, a smaller one with pigtails, and another tall figure James couldn't quite identify. That's our dream house, Lily explained, pointing. See, it has a backyard and everything, and look, flowers. James swallowed hard. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Maybe someday we can have a real house like that? Her eyes shone with hope. With a yard where I can play? Maybe, James managed, his throat tight. Time for bed, okay? After tucking Lily in, James sat at their small kitchen table, the drawing propped against a salt shaker. The bills scattered before him looked like a losing hand of cards. He pulled out his worn Bible, his late wife Sarah's Bible, really, and opened it randomly, seeking guidance. His eyes fell on Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. James ran his fingers over the familiar words. What would Sarah say about this situation? The thought of pretending to be someone's partner for money made his stomach twist. It felt dishonest, wrong. But was it wrong to want a better life for Lily? He spent hours in prayer, wrestling with the decision. Around 3 a.m, he heard Lily coughing in her sleep, that familiar asthmatic wheeze that always worried him. Her inhaler was running low, another expense they could barely afford. The first light of dawn was creeping through the window when James finally reached for his phone. His hands shook slightly as he dialed the number from Daniel Grant's business card. It rang 3 times before a crisp voice answered. Daniel Grant speaking. James took a deep breath. Mr. Grant, this is James Carter. About your proposal. A pause. Yes, I'll do it. Daniel's voice remained coolly professional. Good. We start tomorrow. A sleek black car pulled up outside James and Lily's apartment building at exactly 8 a.m. Lily pressed her face against their living room window, her eyes wide with wonder. Daddy, look, it's like a princess car. She bounced on her tiptoes, her worn sneakers squeaking against the floor. James adjusted the collar of his cleanest button-down shirt and grabbed their overnight bags. "Remember what we talked about, sweetheart? We're going to stay at Mr. Daniel's house for a little while." "Is it a castle?" Lily asked, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. James couldn't help but smile at her excitement. "We'll have to wait and see." The driver, dressed in a crisp uniform, stepped out and opened the back door for them. Lily gasped at the leather seats and immediately climbed in, running her small hands over the smooth surface. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," the driver said. "Mr. Grant is expecting you." James nodded, still feeling out of place as he settled next to Lily. The car smelled new and expensive, nothing like their usual bus rides across town. "Look, Daddy." Lily pointed at a small TV screen built into the seat. "Can I touch it?" "Let's just look for now," James said gently, his stomach turning with nerves. The drive took them through progressively nicer neighborhoods until they reached an area with sprawling estates hidden behind iron gates. When they pulled up to Daniel's home, Lily's mouth fell open. "It is a castle," she whispered. The house was modern and massive, all clean lines and huge windows. Perfectly trimmed hedges lined a circular driveway, and a fountain sparkled in the morning sunday. Daniel waited for them at the front door, wearing casual clothes that probably cost more than James's monthly rent. "Good morning," he said stiffly. "Hi, Mr. Daniel." Lily waved enthusiastically. "Your house is pretty." Something in Daniel's expression softened slightly. "Thank you, Lily. Would you both like some breakfast?" They followed him through a spotless kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. A housekeeper had laid out a spread of fresh fruit, pastries, and coffee. "Wow." Lily climbed onto a high stool at the kitchen island. "Can I have that?" She pointed to a chocolate croissant. "Of course," Daniel said, pouring coffee for himself and James. While Lily happily munched her breakfast, Daniel pulled out a thick folder. "We need to discuss the arrangements." James nodded, trying to focus despite feeling overwhelmed by his surroundings. "First," Daniel said, "public appearances. We need to look natural together. The media will be watching, especially at charity events. Hand-holding, casual touches, terms of endearment, all of it needs to look authentic." James's cheeks warmed. "Right. Stand up," Daniel instructed. "We should practice." Feeling awkward, James rose from his stool. Daniel moved closer and took his hand. Their fingers didn't quite fit together right. "Relax your arm," Daniel muttered. "You're too tense." "Sorry," James whispered back. "I've never done this before." "Done what? Held hands?" Daniel's eyebrow arched. "Pretended to be in love for money." James shot back quietly. Lily's giggle broke through the tension. "You look silly." Both men turned to find her watching them with chocolate-smeared cheeks. "Why are you holding hands like robots?" Daniel actually cracked a small smile. "She has a point." He adjusted his grip on James's hand, making it more natural. "Better?" James had to admit it felt less awkward. They practiced walking together, Daniel showing him how to lean in slightly when they talked. "Pet names," Daniel said next. "Nothing excessive, but dear or honey occasionally will help sell it." "Yes, honey." James tried, the word sticking in his throat. Lily burst into another fit of giggles. "Daddy's face is all red." Her laughter seemed to break through some of the stiffness between them. Even Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly. They spent the rest of the morning reviewing social events they'd need to attend and rules about public behavior. By lunch, Lily was exploring the garden with Daniel's housekeeper while the men finished their discussion. "Your room is upstairs," Daniel said. "Lily's is next door. My bedroom is down the hall, close enough to look proper but with plenty of privacy." James nodded, grateful for the space. "Thank you." As evening fell, James helped Lily settle into her new room. It was bigger than their entire apartment, with a canopy bed that made her squeal with delight. "Look at all the pillows, Daddy." She bounced on the mattress. "It's so soft." "Time for sleep, princess." James tucked her in, making sure her stuffed rabbit was secure in her arms. "Daddy?" Lily whispered as he kissed her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart? I like Mr. Daniel. He's not scary." James paused in the doorway, watching his daughter snuggle into her new bed. Her innocent observation hung in the air as he turned out the light, leaving him wondering if maybe, just maybe, this crazy arrangement might work out after all. The grand ballroom of the Heritage Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors. James tugged at the collar of his borrowed suit, the expensive fabric feeling foreign against his skin. The designer label that Daniel had insisted on made him even more aware of how out of place he felt. "It's too tight," he whispered, fidgeting with the bow tie. Daniel stepped closer, his presence commanding, yet oddly reassuring. "Stop fidgeting," he murmured, reaching up to adjust James's tie with practiced hands. "You look perfect." Lily stood between them in her new pink dress, her small hand wrapped firmly around Daniel's fingers. She gazed up at the glittering decorations with wonder, seemingly oblivious to the curious stares from the other guests. "The ceiling has stars," she whispered in awe, pointing at the twinkling lights above. James noticed how Daniel's expression softened when he looked down at Lily. It was a subtle change, just a slight crinkle around his eyes, a gentle curve of his lips, but it made him look younger, more approachable. As they moved through the crowd, the whispers followed them like shadows. "Is that Daniel Grant? Who's that man with him? Isn't he that single father from? I heard he works at a diner." James felt his cheeks burn, but Daniel's hand found the small of his back, steering him confidently through the sea of designer dresses and expensive suits. The touch was meant for show, part of their rehearsed routine, but James found himself grateful for its steadying presence. They approached a group of board members, their scrutiny almost tangible. Daniel's spine straightened imperceptibly, his CEO mask sliding into place. "Charles? Margaret?" Daniel greeted smoothly. "I'd like you to meet James Carter, my partner." His voice carried just the right amount of pride and affection. "And this lovely young lady is Lily." Lily did a small curtsy, just as they had practiced. "It's nice to meet you," she said clearly, earning surprised smiles from the group. "Well, isn't she precious?" Margaret cooed, but her eyes held calculation as they darted between James and Daniel. Charles cleared his throat. "Quite a change, Daniel. We didn't know you were seeing anyone." "Sometimes the best things in life come as surprises," Daniel replied, his tone leaving no room for further comment. James noticed how Daniel's fingers tightened slightly around Lily's hand, as if drawing strength from her presence. Throughout dinner, James watched Daniel work the room. He was masterful at it, all perfect smiles and measured charm. But in the brief moments when he thought no one was looking, something else showed through. A weariness in his shoulders, a hollow look in his eyes when he laughed at another forced joke. During the main course, Lily dropped her fork with a clatter. Before James could react, Daniel was already there, retrieving it and requesting a clean one from a nearby waiter. He helped Lily cut her chicken into smaller pieces, his movements gentle and patient. "Thank you," Lily beamed at him. "You're good at cutting things, like Daddy." Something flickered across Daniel's face. Longing, perhaps, before he composed himself again. But James had seen it, that crack in the perfect facade, that glimpse of a man who had everything and nothing all at once. As the evening wore on, Lily grew sleepy. She climbed into Daniel's lap during the speeches, her head drooping against his chest. James expected Daniel to stiffen or call for the car immediately, but instead, he simply adjusted his arm to support her better, his other hand absently stroking her hair. The drive home was quiet, the city lights painting soft patterns across their faces. Lily had fallen completely asleep, still curled against Daniel's side. James waited for Daniel to shift her away, to maintain the careful distance he usually kept, but he didn't move. Instead, Daniel stared out the window, his reflection ghosted against the dark glass. His usual mask had slipped completely, replaced by something raw and vulnerable. His hand continued its gentle movement through Lily's hair, as if he didn't want to break whatever spell this moment had cast. James watched them both in the dim light of passing street lamps, the powerful CEO and the little girl who had somehow breached his walls. Daniel's eyes held a tenderness that made James's chest tighten, a loneliness so profound it seemed to fill the entire car. The city rolled by outside, but inside their quiet bubble, something was shifting, changing. Though none of them had the words for it yet, James found himself holding his breath, afraid to disturb this fragile moment where pretense had given way to something that felt dangerously real. Daniel continued to stare out the window, but his eyes weren't seeing the passing scenery. They were focused on something distant, something that made him look both younger and older at the same time. The tenderness in his expression remained, unguarded in the safety of the dark car, as Lily's steady breathing filled the silence between them. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Daniel's mansion kitchen, casting warm rectangles across the marble countertops. The sizzle of butter on the griddle and the sweet scent of vanilla filled the air as James expertly flipped another golden brown pancake. He'd insisted on cooking breakfast himself, despite Daniel's professional chef having the day off. Some routines, like Saturday morning pancakes with Lily, were sacred. Daniel sat at the kitchen island, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied the financial section of the newspaper. He wore casual clothes for once, a soft gray sweater and dark slacks, though he somehow still managed to look perfectly put together. The rustle of paper accompanied the gentle clinking of his coffee cup against its saucer. Lily sat next to Daniel, swinging her legs beneath the high kitchen stool, her stuffed rabbit tucked safely in her lap. She watched James cook with bright eyes, occasionally reaching over to peek at Daniel's newspaper photos. "Can I have blueberries in mine, Daddy?" Lily asked, bouncing slightly in her seat. James smiled, already reaching for the fresh berries. "Coming right up, sweetheart." He sprinkled a handful onto the cooking pancake, arranging them into a smiley face the way she liked. The kitchen settled into a comfortable quiet, the kind that had become increasingly common over the past few weeks. James found himself stealing glances at Daniel, noticing how the CEO's usually stern expression softened when he thought no one was looking. "Mr. Daniel?" Lily's voice broke the silence, innocent and clear. Daniel lowered his paper. "Yes, Lily? Are you my daddy?" The question hung in the air like suspended crystal, fragile and sharp. James's spatula clattered against the griddle. His hands froze mid-flip, heart suddenly hammering against his ribs. Heat rushed to his face, not from the cooking, but from the mortification that flooded through him. Lily continued, oblivious to her father's distress. "Mommy used to say you were, before she went to heaven." James's mind raced back to those difficult days after Sarah's passing, when Lily would cry herself to sleep. How Sarah, in her final months, had spun beautiful stories about a magical father figure who would someday come into their lives, someone successful and kind, who would take care of them both. It had been her way of giving Lily hope, but James had never expected those innocent tales to surface like this. "Lily, honey," James started, his voice strained, but Daniel set down his paper deliberately, turning to face the little girl. His expression was thoughtful, none of the usual guardedness present. "Your mommy said that?" Lily nodded earnestly, clutching her rabbit closer. "She said someone special would come and be my other daddy one day. And you're special, aren't you? You have this big house and you make Daddy smile sometimes." James wanted to sink through the floor. The pancake on the griddle began to smoke slightly, forgotten in his shock. He quickly moved it to a plate, hands trembling, but Daniel didn't look angry or uncomfortable. Instead, he removed his reading glasses slowly, folding them with care. "Your mommy sounds like she was very wise, Lily." He paused, choosing his words with unusual gentleness. "Maybe I can try to be if that's okay." James's head snapped up, stunned by the response. He watched as Daniel shifted in his seat to face Lily more fully. "Would you like that?" Daniel asked her softly. Lily's whole face lit up. "Really? You want to be my daddy too?" "Well," Daniel said, and James detected a slight tremor in his usually confident voice. "I think being a daddy is a very important job. It might take some practice, but if you're patient with me, I'd like to try." Tears pricked at James's eyes as he watched the scene unfold. This wasn't part of their agreement. This wasn't about business meetings or public appearances. This was Daniel Gran, the man who calculated every move, offering something genuine to a little girl who had lost so much. "The pancakes are ready," James managed to say, his voice hardly above a whisper. He placed a plate in front of Lily, the blueberry smile now slightly lopsided from his shaking hands. Lily looked at her breakfast with delight, but then frowned slightly at the large pancake. "Can you help me cut it?" she asked, looking up at Daniel with complete trust. Without hesitation, Daniel stood and moved around the island. He knelt beside Lily's stool, taking the knife and fork in his hands. "Of course. Would you like triangles or squares?" "Triangles, please. That's how Daddy does it." James watched as Daniel carefully cut the pancake into perfect triangles, his movements precise but gentle. The CEO's expression was focused, as if this simple task was as important as any business deal he'd ever made. Lily beamed at him, syrup already sticky on her chin, complicated emotions twisted in James's chest, gratitude for Daniel's kindness, fear of what this meant for their arrangement, and something else he couldn't quite name. He observed how naturally Daniel and Lily interacted, how his daughter's innocent question had cracked open a door neither man had expected to find. The morning sun continued to warm the kitchen, and James found himself holding his breath, caught between wanting to protect his daughter's heart and acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, there was something real growing in this pretend family of theirs. Daniel looked up from his task, catching James's eye. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, a question, a possibility. James felt his heart skip a beat, and he quickly turned back to the griddle, pouring another pancake to hide his confusion. But he couldn't help stealing one more glance as Daniel showed Lily how to properly hold her fork, his hand gentle as he guided hers. The sight made James's chest ache with a mixture of hope and uncertainty that he wasn't quite ready to examine. The Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, painting Daniel's mansion in shades of gold. James stood in the guest room, adjusting his tie with uncertain fingers, when a knock surprised him. Opening the door, he found Daniel in a perfectly tailored Navy suit. "I thought we might go to church today," Daniel said, his voice carrying an unusual hint of nervousness. "If you're comfortable with that." James blinked in surprise. "Church? I noticed the cross you wear," Daniel gestured to the simple silver chain around James's neck. "And I remember you mentioned faith being important to you and Lily." Down the hall, Lily emerged from her room in a pink dress that Daniel had bought her earlier that week. Her face lit up at the sight of them. "Are we going somewhere special?" "We're going to church, sweetheart," James said, watching her eyes widen with joy. "Like we used to with Mommy?" She bounced on her toes, her small patent leather shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. The drive to the local chapel was quiet, filled with an anticipatory energy. James noticed Daniel's fingers drumming against his knee, a rare display of uncertainty from the usually composed CEO. The church was a modest brick building with stained glass windows that caught the morning light. Inside, the wooden pews were worn smooth from years of faithful attendance. They found seats near the back, Lily between them. The familiar scent of old hymnals and polished wood wrapped around James like a comfortable blanket. As the congregation stood for the first hymn, James heard Daniel's whispered confession. "I haven't been in a church since I was 12. Mother stopped bringing me after Father left." The vulnerability in those words made James's heart squeeze. He passed Daniel a hymnal, their fingers brushing briefly. "Just follow along, no pressure." Throughout the service, James found himself watching Daniel more than focusing on the pastor's message. The CEO's usual mask of confidence had softened, replaced by something more genuine, uncertainty mixed with curiosity. When the congregation bowed their heads for prayer, Daniel hesitated before closing his eyes, his shoulders gradually relaxing. Lily, sitting between them, reached for both their hands during the final prayer. James felt Daniel start at the touch, but then grip her small hand gently. The simple gesture brought unexpected tears to James's eyes. After the service, they walked to a nearby park, the spring air fresh and sweet. Lily spotted the playground and looked at them hopefully. "Go ahead," Daniel said, smiling. "But be careful." They settled on a bench, watching her race toward the swings. James noticed Daniel's tie was slightly loosened, his posture less rigid than usual. "Thank you," James said softly, "for coming to church with us. I know it wasn't easy." Daniel's eyes remained on Lily as he spoke. "I felt something in there. Peace, maybe. I can't remember the last time I allowed myself to just be still." "Daddy, Mr. Daniel, push me on the swings." Lily's voice carried across the playground. To James's amazement, Daniel stood first, shrugging off his suit jacket and draping it on the bench. "Coming, sweetheart." What followed was unlike anything James had seen before. Daniel Grant, the stern CEO who calculated every move, was laughing openly as he pushed Lily on the swings, his usually perfect hair ruffled in the breeze, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. "Higher!" Lily squealed, and Daniel obliged, his genuine smile transforming his entire face. James joined them, and soon they were taking turns pushing Lily, their laughter mixing with hers. When she wanted to play tag, Daniel didn't hesitate. He chased her around the playground, playfully letting her escape at the last second. "Got you!" Lily finally tagged Daniel, who dramatically collapsed onto the grass, making her giggle uncontrollably. They ended up having hot dogs from a park vendor for lunch, sitting on a checkered blanket Daniel's driver brought from the car. Daniel didn't even flinch when mustard dripped onto his expensive shirt. "This is better than any fancy restaurant," he declared, making Lily beam. As the afternoon sun began to dip, Lily's energy finally waned. She fell asleep in the car on the way home, her head resting against Daniel's arm. Instead of shifting away, he carefully adjusted to make her more comfortable. Later that night, James lay in his bed in the guest room, staring at the moonlight patterns on the ceiling. The day played like a movie in his mind. Daniel's vulnerable confession in church, his unrestrained laughter in the park, the gentle way he'd carried sleeping Lily to her bed. His heart raced as he realized something that both thrilled and terrified him. The warmth he felt when Daniel smiled wasn't part of their act. The flutter in his chest when their hands brushed wasn't pretend. Somewhere between the practiced smiles and staged affection, real feelings had taken root. James rolled onto his side, touching his mother's cross that hung around his neck. This wasn't supposed to happen. It was meant to be a business arrangement, a year of pretense for his daughter's future. But here he was, lying awake in a mansion that felt less and less like a stranger's house, with his heart doing somersaults over a man who had started as his employer. The memory of Daniel's unguarded smile in the park made his pulse quicken. It was a smile that reached his eyes, erasing years of loneliness for a moment. James had done that. He and Lily had broken through Daniel's careful walls, and what they'd found behind them was breathtaking. James closed his eyes, but sleep remained elusive. The weight of his realization pressed against his chest. He was falling for Daniel Grant, and there was nothing pretend about it. The mahogany doors of the Grant Industries boardroom gleamed under bright fluorescent lights. James adjusted his tie, another borrowed piece from Daniel's wardrobe, as he waited outside. Through the glass walls, he could see Daniel standing at the head of the table, commanding the room with practiced authority. A sharp click of heels against marble made James turn. A woman approached, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her designer suit perfectly pressed. She carried herself with the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of privilege. Her cold gray eyes fixed on James, sizing him up like a predator spotting prey. "Well," she said, her voice crisp as autumn frost, "you must be the companion my son has been parading around town." James straightened his spine. "I'm James Carter. You must be Mrs. Grant." "Evelyn," she corrected. Though her tone suggested he had no right to use her name, she glanced at his suit, her lip curling slightly. "Wearing Daniel's clothes, I see? How economical." Before James could respond, the boardroom doors opened. Daniel's expression flickered with surprise, then hardened. "Mother, I wasn't expecting you." "Clearly." Evelyn brushed past James as if he were invisible. The board meeting seemed an appropriate time to discuss certain concerns about the company's direction. Daniel's jaw tightened. "James, would you mind waiting in my office? This won't take long." James nodded, trying to ignore the knot in his stomach. As he walked away, Evelyn's voice carried down the hallway. "Really, Daniel? A waiter? Have you completely lost your mind?" In Daniel's office, James paced between the floor-to-ceiling windows. He couldn't help glancing at the boardroom, where Evelyn now stood, gesturing sharply. Daniel's shoulders were rigid, his hands planted on the table. 20 minutes later, raised voices leaked through the supposedly soundproof walls. James found himself drawn to the door, his heart pounding as fragments of conversation reached him. "Embarrassing the family name." Evelyn's voice cut like a knife. "Do you think I'm blind? I know exactly what this is. Some gold-digging nobody trying to worm his way into our world." "You don't know anything about him." Daniel's reply was cold. "Oh, please. I had him investigated the moment I heard. A small-time waiter living in that dreadful apartment complex, drowning in medical bills from his dead wife. That's enough. Wake up, Daniel. He's using you, using that child of his to play on your emotions, and you're letting him destroy everything we've built." James stepped back from the door, his hands shaking. The words hit him like physical blows. He'd known this was all pretend, but hearing it laid bare so cruelly made his chest ache. More voices joined the argument, board members trying to mediate. James caught phrases like company image and serious concerns. He sank into one of Daniel's leather chairs, feeling smaller by the second. The meeting eventually ended. James heard the shuffle of feet, the murmur of goodbyes, then Evelyn's voice again, closer to Daniel's office. "I will not stand by and watch you throw away your reputation for this charade. If you won't end it, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of arrangement you have with that man." The office door opened. Daniel entered, his face drawn and tired. His usually perfect tie was slightly askew, and James resisted the urge to fix it. "I'm sorry you had to be here for that," Daniel said quietly. James stood, his hands in his pockets. "She's right, isn't she? About what this looks like. What people will think. My mother's opinion stopped mattering to me a long time ago, but she's not wrong." James looked out at the city skyline, remembering how out of place he'd felt that first day in the building. "I'm not from your world, Daniel. I never will be. And now she's going to tell everyone about our deal. Let her try." Daniel's voice held a steel edge. "I've spent my whole life letting her control everything. Not anymore." James turned back to him, studying the determination in Daniel's face. "Maybe this was a mistake," he said softly. Daniel crossed the room in 3 quick strides. "No," he said firmly, "you're staying." Their eyes met, and for a moment, James saw something fierce and protective in Daniel's gaze. It made his breath catch, made him wonder if maybe, just maybe, this wasn't entirely pretend anymore. But Evelyn's words echoed in his mind. Gold digger, nobody, charade. She'd had him investigated, knew about Sarah's medical bills, about their struggling life. The shame of it burned in his chest. Daniel reached out, adjusting James's borrowed tie with gentle hands. "We knew there would be obstacles," he said quietly. "This changes nothing." James wanted to believe him, wanted to lean into the warmth of Daniel's presence and forget about Evelyn's cruel words. But the weight of their arrangement, the $1 million, the lies, the growing feelings he couldn't explain felt heavier than ever. The elegant Grant Manor sparkled with hundreds of tiny lights strung across its manicured gardens. James stood in front of the mirror in one of the guest rooms, fumbling with his bow tie. This time, the tuxedo wasn't borrowed. Daniel had insisted on having one tailored just for him. "Here, let me help." Daniel appeared behind him, his reflection calm and steady in the mirror. His warm hands brushed against James's neck as he fixed the tie. "There, perfect." James's throat felt tight. "There are going to be reporters tonight." "I know." Daniel's hands lingered on James's shoulders. "Just be yourself. That's more than enough." A knock at the door interrupted them. Lily bounded in wearing a pale pink dress that made her look like a tiny princess. Her eyes sparkled with excitement. "Daddy, look! Miss Rosa did my hair with flowers." James knelt down to admire the small white blooms woven through her braids. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." "Like a real princess?" She twirled, the dress floating around her. "The prettiest princess I've ever seen," Daniel said, and James noticed how natural those words sounded coming from him now. The drive to the Spencer Art Museum was short but tense. Camera flashes greeted them before they even stepped out of the limo. James took a deep breath, remembering Daniel's words. "Be yourself." Lily held both their hands as they walked the red carpet, completely unfazed by the attention. "Look, Daddy, that lady has a camera bigger than me." Her innocent observation made several reporters laugh, and James felt some of his nervousness melt away. Daniel's hand found the small of his back, steady and grounding. Inside, the museum had been transformed into a glittering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors, and ice sculptures decorated every corner. The city's wealthiest citizens mingled among priceless artworks, their jewelry catching the light. "Mr. Grant!" A reporter from the local news station approached, microphone extended. "This is your first public appearance with your family. Would you care to comment?" James tensed, but Daniel's voice remained smooth and confident. "Of course. I'm delighted to introduce James Carter and his daughter Lily. They've brought more joy into my life than I thought possible." The reporter turned to James. "And Mr. Carter, how does it feel to be involved with one of the city's most eligible bachelors?" Before James could stammer out a response, Lily piped up. "Daniel reads me bedtime stories and makes funny voices for all the characters, even the dragons." The reporter's face softened into a genuine smile. "Does he now?" "Uh-huh. And he helped me build a fairy garden in the backyard, and he never forgets to check under my bed for monsters." More reporters gathered, but instead of feeling threatening, they seemed charmed by Lily's unfiltered happiness. James watched in amazement as his daughter won over the crowd with stories about pancake breakfasts and Sunday park visits. Daniel was called away to greet some board members, leaving James and Lily to explore the transformed museum. They found a quiet corner near a massive ice sculpture of an angel. "Daddy," Lily whispered, "do you think the angel is cold?" James chuckled. "I don't think she minds. She's made of ice, after all. Like Elsa." Lily's eyes widened. "Do you think she has magic powers too?" Their conversation was interrupted by the tinkling of glass. Daniel was preparing to make a speech. The crowd gathered around as he took center stage, looking every bit the powerful CEO in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Daniel began. "This charity gala has always been about family, supporting families in need, strengthening family bonds, creating new families through adoption. But I'll admit, for many years, I didn't truly understand what family meant." He paused, his eyes finding James and Lily in the crowd. "That changed when I met James Carter and his remarkable daughter. James is the kind of man who works 2 jobs without complaint, who puts his daughter's needs before his own, who sees the good in people even when they don't see it themselves. He's the man who taught me what family really means." James's heart thundered in his chest. This wasn't part of their script. Daniel's words carried a weight of truth that made his knees weak. "Through James and Lily, I've learned that family isn't about perfect appearances or social status. It's about pancakes on Sunday mornings. It's about checking for monsters under the bed. It's about holding hands during thunderstorms and sharing ice cream on sunny days." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. Even the usually restless reporters stood still, their cameras temporarily forgotten. "So while we're here to raise money for families in need, and I hope you'll all be generous, I want to thank my own family for showing me the true meaning of love." The applause was thunderous. Lily tugged on James's hand. "Daddy, you're crying." James quickly wiped his eyes. "Happy tears, sweetheart." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and warm smiles. Even the reporters seemed to have forgotten their usual sharp questions, instead asking about Lily's fairy garden and James's famous pancakes. As the night wound down, they settled into the back of the limo for the ride home. Lily fell asleep almost immediately, her head resting on James's lap, flower petals falling loose from her braids. James stroked her hair, his heart full of emotions he couldn't name. When he looked up, he caught Daniel watching him. The intensity in Daniel's eyes made heat rush to James's cheeks. It wasn't the practice look they'd rehearsed for public appearances. This was something else entirely, something that made James's pulse quicken and his breath catch. He quickly looked away, pretending to adjust Lily's dress, but he could still feel Daniel's gaze, warm and steady in the darkness of the limo. The morning sun painted long shadows across the sidewalk as James walked hand in hand with Lily toward her elementary school. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass in early autumn. Lily skipped alongside him, her backpack bouncing with each step, her pigtails swaying in the breeze. "And then Mr. Daniel helped me with my math homework," Lily chattered excitedly. "He knows all about fractions, Daddy." James smiled, though his heart tightened at the mention of Daniel. These past few weeks had changed everything their tiny apartment traded for mansion, guest rooms, bus rides for a private driver, and lonely evenings for family dinners. But change, he was learning, came with its own price. As they approached the school gates, James noticed the usual cluster of parents dropping off their children. Today, though, their stares felt sharper, their whispers louder. "That's him," a woman in designer yoga wear muttered to her friend. "The waiter who moved in with Daniel Grant?" "Talk about hitting the jackpot," another replied, not bothering to lower her voice. "Living off a millionaire must be nice." Lily's small hand suddenly gripped James's tighter. Her skip disappeared, replaced by slower, hesitant steps. James's heart sank she'd heard them. "Sweet pea?" James stopped and knelt down to her level. "What's wrong?" Lily's lower lip trembled. "Why are they saying mean things about us, Daddy?" Her eyes welled up with tears. "About you and Mr. Daniel?" James pulled her into a gentle hug, right there on the sidewalk. Other parents walked around them, some still whispering, but he focused only on his daughter's quiet sniffles against his shoulder. "Sometimes," he said softly, "people say unkind things when they don't understand." He pulled back slightly, wiping a tear from her cheek. "But what matters is what we know in our hearts, right? Like how Mr. Daniel reads me stories," Lily asked. "And how he makes you smile more." James's chest tightened with emotion. "Exactly like that, sweetheart. But they're being mean about it." Lily's voice wavered. "I know." James brushed her hair back from her face. "But we're stronger than mean words, aren't we? Remember what we always say?" Lily straightened her shoulders slightly. "We're Carters, and Carters are brave." "That's right." James managed a warm smile. "Now, show me your brave face." Lily scrunched up her nose and made a fierce expression that melted into a giggle. James stood up, taking her hand again. "Ready to learn lots today?" She nodded, some of her usual bounce returning to her step. James walked her to her classroom, making sure she was settled before heading back out. Only when he was alone did he let his own shoulders slump. The day dragged by in a blur of coffee orders and plate deliveries at the diner. James had insisted on keeping his job despite Daniel's protests. He needed something that was still his, still normal. But today, even this felt tainted by the morning's events. That evening, back at Grant Manor, James pushed his dinner around his plate. Daniel had noticed his mood the moment he'd walked in, but had waited until Lily was occupied with her homework in the study to bring it up. "James." Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. "What happened today?" James set down his fork with a sigh. "It's nothing. It's not nothing if it's bothering you this much." The genuine concern in Daniel's voice broke something loose in James's chest. "The other parents at Lily's school?" he burst out. "They're talking. About us. About me, living off your money. Lily heard them today, and she cried, and I..." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm scared I'm ruining everything. Your reputation, your image. Stop." Daniel's chair scraped against the floor as he stood up. He walked around the table to James's side. "Look at me." James reluctantly raised his eyes to meet Daniel's steady gaze. "I don't care what they say," Daniel said, each word clear and deliberate. "Do you understand? I don't care about my image or what some prejudiced parents think. But your company, my company will be fine." Daniel's expression softened. "What matters to me is right here, you and Lily." As if summoned by her name, Lily appeared in the doorway, clutching her math workbook. "Daddy? Mr. Daniel? I need help with number 6. Daniel turned toward her, extending one hand while keeping his other on James's shoulder. "Come here, sweetheart." Lily patted over, and Daniel took her small hand in his. Then, surprising James, he reached down and took James's hand too. His grip was warm, steady, anchoring them both. "We'll figure out number 6 together," Daniel said, his fingers intertwined with James's, refusing to let go. "We'll figure everything out together." The morning sun peeked through wisps of clouds as Daniel's black SUV wound its way along country roads. James sat in the passenger seat, watching the city fade into rolling hills and farmland. In the back, Lily pressed her face against the window, her eyes wide with wonder at each passing barn and grazing horse. "Where are we going?" she asked for the 10th time, bouncing with excitement. Daniel glanced in the rearview mirror, a small smile playing on his lips. "It's a surprise, remember?" James couldn't help but notice how different Daniel looked today. Gone was the crisp suit and tie. Instead, he wore jeans and a soft blue sweater that made him seem younger, more approachable, more real. The SUV turned onto a gravel road, leading to a sprawling apple orchard. A weathered wooden sign read, "Harper's Farm, Stables." Lily squealed with delight as she spotted horses grazing in a nearby pasture. "I've never been to a real farm before," she exclaimed, practically jumping out of her seat before the car stopped. Daniel parked and turned to James. "I thought we could all use a break from the city, from everything." James nodded, touched by the thoughtfulness. "Thank you," he said softly. They spent the morning picking apples, with Daniel lifting Lily onto his shoulders to reach the highest branches. Her laughter echoed through the orchard as she dropped apples into their basket. James watched them, his heart doing strange flips in his chest. "Daddy, look," Lily called out, holding up a perfect red apple. "Mr. Daniel says I'm the best apple picker he's ever seen." After filling 2 baskets, they headed to the stables. A gentle old mare named Buttercup was brought out for Lily's first riding lesson. James held his breath as the instructor helped her into the saddle, but Daniel's steady hand on his shoulder calmed his nerves. "She'll be fine," Daniel assured him. "I learned to ride on this very farm when I was her age." James turned to him, surprised. "You did?" Daniel nodded, his eyes distant with memory. "My grandfather used to bring me here. It was the only place I felt like I could just be myself, not the heir to the grand empire." They watched as Lily circled the paddock, her face glowing with pride. When it was James's turn to try riding, he was much less graceful, clinging nervously to the reins while Daniel and Lily laughed good-naturedly. As afternoon faded into evening, Daniel led them to a clearing where a fire pit was already set up with comfortable chairs and warm blankets. The farm staff had prepared everything, including hot chocolate for Lily and thermoses of coffee for the adults. Lily curled up in her chair, wrapped in a blanket, watching the flames dance. "This is better than TV," she mumbled sleepily. James tucked the blanket tighter around her. "Thank you for today," he said to Daniel. "I can't remember the last time we had an adventure like this." The firelight cast warm shadows across Daniel's face as he stirred the logs with a stick. "Tell me about her," he said quietly. "Your wife, if you want to." James was silent for a moment, watching the sparks rise into the darkening sky. "Sarah," he began, his voice soft but steady. "She loved days like this. Adventure days, she called them. She was always planning little surprises for Lily." Daniel listened intently as James spoke about Sarah's laugh, her passion for teaching kindergarten, her battle with illness that ended too soon. "She made me promise to keep having adventures with Lily," James said. "But sometimes it's hard, you know, working 2 jobs, just trying to keep our heads above water." "You're doing an amazing job," Daniel said firmly. "Lily is proof of that." They sat in comfortable silence, broken only by the crackling fire and Lily's soft breathing as she dozed in her chair. Then Daniel began to speak, his voice lower than usual. "I've spent 20 years building an empire," he said, "but I've never built a home. Every relationship," he shook his head. "They all wanted the CEO, the bank account, the status. Nobody ever just wanted Daniel." James watched as Daniel's fingers traced patterns in the dirt beside his chair. "After a while, I stopped trying. Threw myself into work, convinced myself I didn't need more." He looked up at James. "Until now." The vulnerability in Daniel's eyes made James's breath catch. This wasn't the polished businessman who had proposed their arrangement months ago. This was someone new, or maybe someone who had been there all along, waiting to be discovered. Lily stirred in her sleep, murmuring something about horses. The sound seemed to break the spell, and Daniel cleared his throat, reaching for more firewood. "We should probably head back soon," he said, but made no move to get up. James nodded, but remained still, watching the flames dance. His mind wandered back through the day. The easy laughter, the shared glances, the way Daniel's hand had steadied him when he almost fell off the horse. None of it had felt forced or fake. None of it had felt like an arrangement. The fire crackled, sending sparks spinning up into the night sky. James watched them fade into the darkness, a realization settling deep in his chest. This isn't pretend anymore. In the comfortable silence that followed, James could feel something shifting, something fundamental changing in the space between them. But for now, he was content to sit by the fire, watching his daughter sleep peacefully and stealing glances at the man who had somehow become so much more than a business arrangement. The autumn breeze rustled through the schoolyard as children played during recess. Lily sat alone on a wooden bench, her small legs swinging back and forth as she drew pictures in her notebook. A shadow fell across her page, and she looked up to find an elegant older woman standing before her, perfectly styled silver hair gleaming in the sunlight. "Hello, dear. You must be Lily," Evelyn Grant said, her voice smooth as honey. She held out a beautifully wrapped box of chocolates. "I'm Daniel's mother." Lily's eyes lit up. "Really? Mr. Daniel never told me about his mommy." Evelyn's lips curved into a careful smile as she sat beside Lily. "Oh, that's because Daniel and I haven't spoken in a while, but I've been so curious about his new family." She opened the box of chocolates, offering them to Lily. "These are special chocolates from Switzerland. Would you like one?" Lily hesitated, remembering her father's warnings about strangers, but this was Daniel's mother. She picked a chocolate shaped like a seashell. "Thank you," Lily said politely, the way her father had taught her. "You're such a well-mannered child," Evelyn praised, watching Lily eat the chocolate. "Tell me, dear, how did your daddy and my Daniel meet? It must be quite a story." Lily's face brightened. "Oh, Daddy went to a big meeting with Mr. Daniel, and then Miss Daniel gave Daddy lots of money to—" She stopped suddenly, remembering her father's serious face when he'd told her some things were private. "To what, sweetheart?" Evelyn leaned closer, her voice gentle but insistent. "You can tell me. I'm family now, aren't I?" Lily fidgeted with her notebook. "Well, to pretend to be his boyfriend for a year." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "But it's okay, because now they really like each other. Mr. Daniel reads me stories and helps me with homework, just like a real daddy." Evelyn's smile widened, though it didn't reach her eyes. "How fascinating. And when did this arrangement begin?" Lily counted on her fingers. 3 months ago? But we live in Mr. Daniel's big house now, and Daddy smiles more than he used to." "I see." Evelyn stood, smoothing her designer suit. "Thank you for talking with me, dear. Here, take the rest of the chocolates." She placed the box in Lily's lap and walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement. The next morning, James's phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. He opened one to find his world crumbling. Breaking news. CEO's fake family exposed. $1 million deal revealed. The article, complete with photos of James and Lily, detailed their arrangement with cruel precision. James's hands shook as he read quotes from an anonymous source close to the family. At that moment, Daniel burst into the kitchen, his face ashen. "Have you seen this?" He thrust his phone at James, showing the same article. "Did you tell someone? Did you sell this story?" "What? No!" James stood up, reaching for Daniel. "I would never—" Daniel stepped back, his expression hardening. "Then how did this get out? The only people who knew were you, me, and—" He stopped, looking at Lily, who sat at the breakfast table with tears in her eyes. "Daddy, I'm sorry," she whispered. "The nice lady with the chocolates asked me questions. She said she was Daniel's mommy." James felt the blood drain from his face. "Evelyn!" Daniel's jaw clenched. "Get out." "Daniel, please, let me explain." "I said get out." Daniel's voice cracked. "I trusted you. I let you into my home, my life, and now my reputation is ruined because you couldn't control your daughter?" "Don't you dare blame Lily," James said, his voice low and fierce. "She's 7 years old. Your mother manipulated her. My mother wouldn't have had anything to use if it weren't for this ridiculous arrangement." Daniel paced the kitchen, running his hands through his hair. "I should have known better. You probably planned this from the start, didn't you? Waiting for the right moment to cash in on the scandal?" James felt like he'd been slapped. "Is that really what you think of me, after everything we've shared? I don't know what to think anymore." Daniel wouldn't meet his eyes. "Just leave, please." Outside, reporters had already gathered at the gates. James could hear their shouts and see camera flashes through the windows. He took Lily's hand and led her upstairs to Pat. In their room, the guest room that had started to feel like home, James pulled out their old suitcase. His hands trembled as he folded clothes and gathered Lily's toys. She sat on the bed, clutching the teddy bear Daniel had given her, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she hiccuped. "I didn't mean to tell. She said she was family." James paused his packing and gathered Lily in his arms. "Oh, sweetheart, this isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. But Mr. Daniel is mad at us now. He doesn't want us anymore." James swallowed hard, fighting back his own tears. Sometimes grown-ups get scared and hurt, and they say things they don't mean. "Are we going back to our old apartment?" James zipped up the suitcase, his heart heavy. "We might have to leave," he whispered, though each word felt like glass in his throat. Through the window, he could hear more cars arriving, more voices shouting questions. The scandal was growing by the minute. He thought of all the tender moments, Sunday, breakfasts, evening prayers, shared laughter now tainted by doubt and betrayal. The worst part wasn't losing the comfortable lifestyle or even the money. It was losing the family they'd built, the love that had grown real despite its artificial beginnings. Daniel's cold eyes flashed in his memory, and James felt something break inside him. How could someone who'd held them so close suddenly push them so far away? But he knew the answer. Pride, fear, and a lifetime of walls, rebuilt in an instant of betrayal. James lifted the suitcase with one hand and took Lily's small hand in the other. She still clutched the teddy bear, and James didn't have the heart to tell her to leave it behind. James sat on the worn couch in his small apartment, surrounded by a fortress of unpaid bills and eviction notices. The paper crinkled beneath his fingers as he held the latest warning, the bright red final notice seeming to mock him. Lily curled up next to him, her head resting against his arm, her usual sparkle dimmed by worry. "Are we going to have to move again, Daddy?" she asked in a small voice. James swallowed hard, trying to keep his voice steady. "Maybe, sweetheart, but we'll figure something out. We always do." The apartment felt smaller than ever after their time at Daniel's mansion. The water stain on the ceiling seemed darker, the creaky floorboards louder, and the drafty windows more noticeable. James had thought he was doing the right thing for Lily, but now everything lay in ruins. His phone buzzed with another message from the diner manager. They'd hired someone else while he was playing house with the rich folk, as they'd put it. The words stung, but not as much as the memory of Daniel's face when the story broke. That look of betrayal, of hurt, turning to ice. "I miss Mr. Daniel," Lily whispered, clutching her drawing pad. She'd been sketching houses again, but now they all had sad faces in the windows. "He made really good hot chocolate." James closed his eyes, his chest aching. "I know, honey. I miss him too." Across town, Daniel Grant paced the empty halls of his mansion, his footsteps echoing against marble floors that had once rang with Lily's giggles. His mother's words played on repeat in his mind, a poisonous loop. "He was using you, Daniel, just like everyone else. Did you really think a waiter would want you for anything but your money?" He paused at the kitchen, remembering Sunday mornings with James at the stove, flour on his nose as he taught Lily how to flip pancakes. The kitchen staff had the day off. Daniel couldn't bear to hear anyone else moving through these spaces that still held echoes of his fake family. Fake. The word felt bitter on his tongue. His phone buzzed again. Another board member asking about damage control. Daniel ignored it, moving to his study where financial reports lay untouched. He'd thrown himself into work, but couldn't focus. Every spreadsheet reminded him of helping Lily with her math homework. James watching from the doorway with that soft smile that made Daniel's heart skip. It was all an act, Daniel muttered to himself, running a hand through his disheveled hair. $1 million performance. But if that was true, why did James look so devastated when he left? Why did Lily cry and try to hug him goodbye? Daniel had turned away, his walls slamming back into place. Protection against the pain. The mansion felt like a museum now. Perfect, pristine, and utterly lifeless. No more crayon drawings on the fridge. No more mismatched socks in the laundry. No more warm bodies on the couch during movie nights. Daniel's fingers traced the smooth wood of his desk, remembering how James had fixed its wobbly leg one afternoon, refusing payment. "Not everything has to be a transaction," he'd said with that crooked grin. A flash of pink caught his eye, something under the couch in his study. Daniel knelt down, reaching beneath to pull out a small stuffed rabbit, worn with love and missing one button eye. Lily's favorite toy, the one she couldn't sleep without. His hands trembled as he held it, remembering how she'd clutch it during thunderstorms, how she'd make it dance to make him laugh when he looked tired after long meetings. The rabbit still smelled faintly of the lavender detergent James used, the same scent that lingered on his clothes when they sat close during family dinners. Daniel sank into his leather chair, the rabbit cradled in his shaking hands. The mansion's silence pressed in around him, broken only by the sound of his ragged breathing as he fought back tears he refused to acknowledge. Back in the apartment, James gathered the bills into a neat stack, trying to calculate how many odd jobs he'd need to avoid eviction. Lily had fallen asleep against him, her face peaceful despite everything. "I'm sorry," he whispered, smoothing her hair. "I'm so sorry I messed everything up." The setting sun cast long shadows through their threadbare curtains, painting the walls in shades of gold that reminded James of mornings in Daniel's kitchen. He'd thought, for a brief moment, they'd found something real there, something that transcended contracts and pretense. But now they were back where they started, except James's heart felt heavier than before, weighted down with memories of what could have been. He'd never meant to fall in love with Daniel Grant. That hadn't been part of the deal. The stuffed rabbit's absence hit him then. Illy would notice soon. It was probably still at the mansion, forgotten in their hasty departure. One more piece of them left behind in a world they'd only borrowed for a while. In his study, Daniel's fingers tightened around the pink rabbit, his normally composed features crumpling as the emptiness of his perfect house echoed around him. Sunday afternoon sunlight filtered through the dusty windows of James's apartment, casting long shadows across the cramped living room. James sat at their small kitchen table with Lily, her pink journal open before them. She clutched her favorite pencil, the one with a unicorn eraser that Daniel had given her. "What should I write about today, Daddy?" Lily asked, fidgeting in her chair. James tried to smile. "Anything you want, sweetheart. Sometimes writing helps when we're feeling sad." Lily's lower lip trembled. "I miss Daniel. Can I write to him instead?" James's heart clenched, but he nodded. "If that's what you want to do?" Lily bent over the paper, her tongue poking out in concentration as she carefully formed each letter. James watched as her small hands moved across the page, her handwriting wobbly but determined. "Dear Daniel," she read aloud as she wrote, "I miss you very much. The apartment is quiet without you. Daddy is sad all the time now, even when he tries to smile." James blinked back tears, but Lily continued writing, lost in her thoughts. "You're the only daddy I've ever known. Remember when you taught me to ride your horse and when you read me stories before bed? Those were the best days ever." Her pencil scratched against the paper. "Please come back. We can be a real family. I promise to be good." She looked up at James, her eyes swimming with tears. "Do you think he'll read it, Daddy?" James stroked her hair, his throat tight. "I don't know, honey. Can we send it, please?" James stared at the letter, at his daughter's raw honesty spilled across the page. Part of him wanted to protect her from more disappointment, but he couldn't deny her this chance. "Okay, sweetheart, we'll mail it." They walked to the post office together, Lily clutching the envelope like a treasure. She stood on tiptoes to push it through the mail slot herself, then watched it disappear with solemn eyes. "Now we wait?" she asked. "Now we wait," James agreed, taking her small hand in his. In his corner office high above the city, Daniel sat surrounded by pristine emptiness. The space felt hollow without James's warm presence and Lily's infectious laughter. His mother's words echoed in his head. "They only wanted your money. It was all fake." His assistant knocked softly. "Mr. Grant, some mail arrived for you." Daniel waved her in without looking up from his computer. She placed a small stack of envelopes on his desk and quietly withdrew. He almost ignored them, but a familiar unicorn sticker caught his eye. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up the envelope. The return address was James's apartment. He recognized Lily's uneven handwriting immediately. Daniel opened the letter carefully, unfolding the lined paper. As he read Lily's words, the careful walls he'd built around his heart began to crumble. "You're the only daddy I've ever known." The simple sentence hit him like a physical blow. Memories flooded back, teaching Lily to ride, her tiny hands trusting in his, reading bedtime stories while she curled against his side, her delighted giggles when he made silly voices for each character. "Daddy is sad all the time now." Daniel closed his eyes, remembering James's gentle smile, his quiet strength, the way he'd brought warmth to Daniel's cold mansion. Had it really all been fake? The late-night conversations, the shared prayers, the way James looked at him when he thought Daniel wouldn't notice? "We can be a real family." His vision blurred as he reached the end of the letter. Lily's honest words cut through layers of pride and fear, reaching the truth he'd been hiding from. Somewhere along the way, their pretend family had become real. The money hadn't mattered for a long time. Daniel set the letter down on his desk, his hands shaking. He stared out his office window at the city below, seeing nothing but his own reflection in the glass. "What have I done?" he whispered to the empty room. The words hung in the air, heavy with regret. The letter lay open on his desk, Lily's hopeful words, waiting for an answer. The unicorn sticker caught the afternoon light, a small, bright reminder of the joy that had filled his life before pride and fear had torn it all apart. He touched the letter again, running his fingers over Lily's careful handwriting. His mother's accusations seemed hollow now, compared to the pure truth in this child's words. What was his empire worth without the family he'd pushed away? What good was his carefully maintained image if it meant sacrificing real love? The office felt colder than ever as Daniel whispered again, "What have I done?" Rain drummed against the apartment windows, creating rivers of water that distorted the view of the gray city outside. In the small kitchen, James stirred a pot of mac and cheese, Illy's favorite comfort food. The cheap pasta wasn't much, but it was what he could afford now that they were back in their old life. "Is it ready yet, Daddy?" Lily asked from where she sat at their wobbly kitchen table, coloring with worn crayons. "Almost, sweetheart." James tried to keep his voice cheerful, though his heart felt heavy. The familiar scent of the simple dinner brought back memories of countless meals shared at Daniel's mansion, where they'd cook together in his gleaming kitchen, laughing and talking. Thunder rumbled outside, and Lily jumped slightly. "I don't like storms," she said quietly. "I know, baby, but we're safe in here." James reached for the milk in their nearly empty fridge when a knock echoed through the apartment. Lily's head snapped up. "Who's that?" "Stay here," James said, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Another knock came, more insistent this time. James crossed the small living room, his sock feet silent on the worn carpet. Through the peephole, he saw a familiar figure, and his heart skipped a beat. He hesitated, hand on the doorknob, before slowly pulling it open. Daniel stood in the hallway, completely drenched from the rain. His usually perfect suit was soaked through, his silver hair plastered to his forehead. In his hand, he clutched a piece of paper, Lily's letter, now wrinkled and water-stained. "James," Daniel said, his voice rough. "Please." James gripped the doorframe, his knuckles white. "What are you doing here?" "I got Lily's letter." Daniel held up the paper, droplets falling from it. "I've been driving around for hours, trying to find the courage to come up here." "Daniel?" Lily's small voice came from behind James. She peeked around his leg, her eyes growing wide. "Hi, sweetheart," Daniel said softly, his expression crumbling at the sight of her. James wanted to close the door, to protect himself and Lily from more pain, but he couldn't move, couldn't look away from the raw emotion on Daniel's face. "I was wrong," Daniel said, meeting James's eyes. "So terribly wrong. I let my mother's words poison everything we had built. I let my pride and my fears make me doubt what I knew in my heart was real." "You believed I was using you?" James said, the hurt still fresh in his voice. "After everything we shared, you thought it was all about the money." "I know." Daniel ran a trembling hand through his wet hair. "I've spent my whole life expecting people to want something from me. It was easier to believe the worst than to trust that someone could actually love me for who I am." A crack of thunder made Lily jump, and she pressed closer to James's side. Daniel's eyes followed the movement, filled with longing. "The house is so empty without you both," he continued, his voice breaking. "I miss Lily's laughter echoing through the halls. I miss our morning coffees and evening talks. I miss—" He swallowed hard. "I miss my family." "Daniel!" Lily suddenly darted forward, ducking under James's arm before he could stop her. Daniel dropped to his knees, not caring about his expensive suit against the dirty hallway floor, and caught Lily in his arms. He held her tight, burying his face in her hair as she wrapped her small arms around his neck. "I missed you so much," Lily whispered. "Did you read my letter? I meant every word." "I did, sweetheart." Daniel pulled back just enough to look at her face, gently brushing her hair back. "Your letter made me realize what a fool I've been. You showed me what really matters." James watched them, feeling something crack in his chest. The wall he'd built around his heart since their departure began to crumble at the sight of Daniel holding Lily with such tenderness, both of them completely oblivious to the water dripping from his clothes onto her pajamas. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," Daniel said, looking up at James while keeping one arm around Lily, "but I'm asking for a chance to prove myself. Not with money or contracts or pretense, just me, loving you both with everything I have." James felt tears burning behind his eyes. The sincerity in Daniel's voice, the vulnerability in his expression, it was everything he'd wished for during their darkest moments together. "You're all wet," Lily said, patting Daniel's cheek. "Like when we got caught in the sprinklers that time in your garden, remember?" A smile touched Daniel's lips, though his eyes remained fixed on James. "I remember everything, Lily. Every moment with you and your father has been the most precious gift I've ever received." The smell of burning mac and cheese suddenly filled the apartment. "Oh no," James muttered, turning toward the kitchen. "Stay," Daniel said quickly, reaching out with his free hand. "Please, let me take you both home, to our home. I'll order whatever food you want. The mansion isn't our home, James said quietly, though his resolve was weakening. It's not the mansion that makes it home, Daniel replied. It's us, together. That's what Lily helped me understand through her letter. Home isn't about the place. It's about the love we share. James looked at Lily, still wrapped in Daniel's arms, her face glowing with joy despite the storm raging outside. Something inside him softened, like ice melting in the spring Sunday. The hurt wasn't gone, but seeing Daniel here, humbled and honest, made him believe healing was possible. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the damp grass of Central Park. Daniel had called early, asking James and Lily to meet him at their special spot, the quiet corner near the duck pond, where they'd shared their first real laugh months ago. James felt his heart racing as they walked along the familiar path, Lily's small hand warm in his. Look, the ducks are back! Lily pointed excitedly at the pond where several mallards glided across the water's surface. Her enthusiasm brought a smile to James's face, despite his nerves. Daniel was already waiting for them, looking less like the polished CEO they'd first met, and more like the man they'd grown to love. He wore casual clothes, jeans, and a soft sweater, and his usually perfect hair was slightly tousled by the breeze. His eyes lit up when he saw them approaching. You came, Daniel said softly, relief evident in his voice. We did, James replied, trying to keep his tone neutral, even as his pulse quickened. Lily released James's hand and ran to Daniel, who caught her in a warm embrace. I missed you so much, she whispered loud enough for James to hear. I missed you too, sweetheart. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. Both of you. Several morning joggers and dog walkers passed by, some slowing to watch the scene unfold. James felt self-conscious, remembering all the gossip and judgment they'd faced before, but Daniel seemed completely unconcerned with their audience. James, Daniel began, setting Lily down gently. I've been doing a lot of thinking. Me too, James admitted, crossing his arms protectively across his chest. When we started this arrangement, Daniel chose his words carefully. I thought I knew exactly what I wanted. A perfect image. A picture-perfect family to show the world. He took a step closer to James. I was such a fool. A young couple walking their golden retriever paused nearby, trying not to stare but clearly interested in the unfolding drama. Lily stood between James and Daniel, her eyes darting back and forth between them. I thought I could buy happiness, Daniel continued, his voice growing stronger. But what I found with you and Lily, the Sunday breakfasts, the bedtime stories, the little moments of just being together, those were real. Those were priceless. James felt tears threatening to form in his eyes. But Daniel wasn't finished. To James's surprise, and the obvious interest of their growing audience, Daniel lowered himself to one knee on the damp grass. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple silver ring. Oh my goodness! A woman walking by whispered loudly to her friend. Lily's eyes went wide. Daddy, look! She gasped, clutching James's hand. James Carter. Daniel's voice was clear and steady now, though his eyes shimmered with emotion. I don't want any more contracts. No more deals. No more pretending. He held up the ring. This isn't about money or image or what anyone else thinks. This is about love, real love, the kind that grows from burnt pancakes in messy living rooms and holding each other through hard times. James felt rooted to the spot, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. The small crowd that had gathered watched with bated breath. I love you, Daniel continued. I love our daughter. I love the family we've become. He took a deep breath. Will you marry me? No strings attached, just us, building a real life together? Lily bounced on her toes, practically vibrating with excitement. Say yes, Daddy. Please say yes. James looked at Daniel, really looked at him. Gone was the cold, guarded businessman who'd first proposed their arrangement. In his place knelt a man who had learned to love, to be vulnerable, to put family before pride. James saw in Daniel's eyes all the quiet moments they'd shared, all the laughter and tears, all the potential for a future together. Yes, James whispered, then louder. Yes. Applause erupted from their impromptu audience as Daniel slipped the ring onto James's finger. Lily launched herself at both of them, and they caught her in a three-way hug, all laughing and crying at once. We're going to be a real family? Lily asked, her face glowing with joy. We already are, sweetheart, Daniel answered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. We already are. As the crowd dispersed, offering congratulations and well wishes, the three of them began their walk home. Lily skipped between them, holding both their hands, occasionally making them swing her forward. The morning sun painted everything in warm light, and the air smelled fresh and clean after yesterday's rain. "I love you," James said quietly to Daniel as they walked. "I love you too," Daniel replied, squeezing Lily's hand. "Both of you." They made their way through the park, 3 hearts beating as one, a family reborn in truth and love. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of the small chapel, casting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. The modest space felt intimate and warm, filled with the handful of people who had supported their unconventional journey to love. Fresh flowers decorated the altar, their sweet scent mixing with the familiar musty comfort of old hymn books and well-worn prayer cushions. James stood at the front of the chapel, fidgeting with the cuffs of his simple charcoal suit. His heart thundered in his chest as he watched the guests settling into their seats. The diner staff, who had covered his shifts when Lily was sick, sat in one row, dressed in their Sunday best. His elderly neighbor, who had watched Lily after school, occupied another pew, dabbing at her eyes already with a lace handkerchief. Daniel's presence beside him was steady and sure. Gone was the cold CEO facade. Instead, he practically glowed with joy, his silver hair catching the morning light. He wore an elegant navy suit that probably cost more than James's entire wardrobe, but his expression held nothing but humble gratitude as he greeted each guest with genuine warmth. The soft notes of canon in D filled the chapel as the wooden doors opened. Lily appeared, radiant in her white dress, with a flower crown nestled in her curls. She took her role as flower girl with utmost seriousness, carefully dropping rose petals along the aisle. But she couldn't contain her excitement completely. Every few steps, she would look up at James and Daniel with a brilliant smile that made several guests chuckle warmly. When she reached the altar, Lily gave both men fierce hugs before taking her place beside them. The minister stepped forward, his weathered face kind as he addressed the congregation. "We gather today to witness not just the union of 2 hearts, but the blessing of a family," he began. "Love, as we know, comes in many forms. Sometimes it arrives in unexpected packages, teaching us that God's plans are greater than our own." James felt Daniel's hand slip into his, squeezing gently. How far they'd come from that first awkward meeting in the corporate office, when love had seemed like nothing more than a business transaction. The minister invited them to share their vows. Daniel turned to face James, his usually composed voice thick with emotion. "James," he began, "I spent decades building walls around my heart, thinking success and solitude were enough. Then you and Lily crashed through those walls with your honesty, your strength, and your capacity for love despite life's hardships." He paused, swallowing hard. "You taught me that real wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the joy of Sunday morning pancakes, in bedtime stories, in simple moments of trust and tenderness." James blinked back tears as Daniel continued, "I promise to cherish you, support you, and walk beside you in faith and love for all our days. I promise to be the partner you deserve and the father Lily needs." He turned to include Lily in his gaze. "You two are the greatest gift I've ever received." Lily beamed up at them, clutching her little basket of remaining flower petals. James took a deep breath, his own vows rising from his heart. "Daniel, when we first met, I thought you were just another rich man who couldn't understand my struggles. I was so wrong." His voice wavered but held strong. "You showed me that true character isn't about where you come from, but how you love. You've loved us with such patience, such generosity of spirit." James squeezed Daniel's hands. "I promise to stand by you, to help you carry your burdens as you've helped carry mine. I promise to keep building this family with you, day by day, with faith and forgiveness and joy." He smiled through his tears. "You may have started as our pretend daddy, but you've become our real blessing." The minister then turned to Lily, who straightened up importantly. "And do you, Lily Carter, promise to help your fathers build this family with love and laughter?" "I do," Lily declared with such enthusiasm that the chapel filled with tender laughter. "And I promise to always make Daddy Daniel pancakes on his birthday." The rings were exchanged, simple gold bands that shone with the weight of their promises. As the minister pronounced them married, the chapel erupted in applause and cheers. Daniel pulled James close, kissing him with all the love that had grown between them over their extraordinary journey together. Lily threw her remaining flower petals over them in celebration, her giggles joining the joyful sounds filling the chapel. The sunlight seemed to brighten, as if heaven itself was smiling upon this family that had found each other against all odds. The congregation stood, their applause continuing as James and Daniel turned to face them, hands clasped tight. Lily squeezed between them, taking both their hands, completing their circle of love. In that moment, the chapel held not just a wedding ceremony, but the birth of something precious. A family bound not by blood or money, but by the purest love of all. I present to you, the minister announced over the cheers, the Grant Carter family. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the sprawling backyard of their new home. It wasn't as grand as Daniel's old mansion, but it was perfect, a comfortable two-story house with a white picket fence and plenty of room for Lily to play. James spread out a checkered blanket on the fresh grass, while Daniel arranged containers of homemade sandwiches and lemonade. "Buddy, come back here." Lily's giggles filled the air as she chased after their newest family member, a golden retriever puppy who had stolen one of her hair ribbons. The puppy darted between Daniel's legs, causing him to nearly drop the pitcher of lemonade. "Careful there, sweetheart," James called out, but he couldn't help smiling. The sight of his daughter's joy-filled face made his heart swell. Just months ago, they had lived in a tiny apartment, struggling to make ends meet. Now, here they were, in a home filled with love and laughter. Daniel caught the puppy and scooped him up, extracting the ribbon from his mouth. "I think someone needs some training," he said, scratching behind the puppy's ears. "Though, I have to admit, he's got good taste in accessories." Lily bounded over, her cheeks flushed from running. "Can I give Buddy some treats, Daddy?" She looked at both James and Daniel. She had taken to calling them both Daddy now, and neither could deny the joy it brought them. "After we eat," James said, patting the blanket. "Come on, everyone, food's getting cold." They settled onto the blanket, Buddy curling up beside Lily. Daniel reached for James's hand, and they bowed their heads as James said grace. "Dear Lord, thank you for this food, for this beautiful day, and most of all, for bringing us together as a family. Amen." "Amen," Lily echoed, reaching eagerly for a sandwich. Daniel watched his family eat, feeling a warmth in his chest that no business success had ever provided. He remembered the lonely dinners in his executive office, the cold efficiency of his old life. Money had bought him comfort. Yes, the finest clothes, the most expensive cars, the biggest house. But it had never bought him this, the simple joy of watching his daughter, because that's what Lily was now, legally and in his heart, take enormous bites of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or the tender glances James gave him across their picnic spread. "Remember our first dinner together?" James asked, as if reading Daniel's thoughts. "You were so stiff, trying to teach me proper table manners." Daniel chuckled. "And you kept dropping your fork on purpose to annoy me?" "I did not," James protested, but his eyes twinkled with mischief. "You were both silly," Lily declared, making them laugh. "But Daddy Daniel, you're not scary anymore. You're soft now, like Buddy." "Soft, am I?" Daniel raised an eyebrow, then suddenly lunged forward to tickle her. Lily squealed with delight, and soon all three were engaged in a tickle fight, with Buddy barking and jumping around them excitedly. When they finally collapsed back onto the blanket, breathless with laughter, James looked at his husband with wonder. The man beside him was so different from the cold CEO who had proposed that business arrangement a year ago. Love had transformed him, softening his sharp edges and warming his heart. Daniel caught James staring and smiled. "What are you thinking about? About how God works in mysterious ways?" James replied softly. "All those years of struggling, of wondering why life had to be so hard. And it was leading me here, to you, to this." Daniel squeezed his hand. "I spent years thinking I could buy happiness. Turns out what I needed most was freely given love, faith, family." He looked at Lily, who was sharing her cookie with Buddy. "And a 7-year-old to teach me what really matters." As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and orange, a cool breeze rustled through the trees. James pulled out a quilt from their picnic basket and wrapped it around them all. Lily crawled into Daniel's lap, her small body fitting perfectly against his chest. "We're really a family now," she said, her voice soft and content. Daniel felt tears well up in his eyes as he pulled James closer, wrapping one arm around his husband while holding Lily with the other. His heart felt so full, it might burst. This was what redemption felt like, not in grand gestures or million-dollar deals, but in quiet moments of pure, uncomplicated love. The setting sun painted their faces in warm light as they sat together. A family bound not by blood or business contracts, but by something far more precious: choice, faith, and unconditional love. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of James Carter, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.